We're almost ready to begin our presentation. So for those of you who just joined, my name is Emily Denoncourt, and I'm joined today by Dina Claros and Katie Chu in our admission office. And we're very excited that you're here with us this morning. We'll begin this a PowerPoint presentation in just a moment. And around between 9:20 and 9:30, we will switch over to a Q&A portion of the visit. We have a couple of students and some administrators that will be joining us and are excited to greet you virtually and answer your questions as well. So we'll get started in just a moment.
Again, as a reminder, using the toolbar at the bottom of the screen, you're welcome to turn your camera off if you'd like during Emily's presentation. And that's also your microphone button. Please leave your microphone turned off during the presentation. If during the Q&A you'd like to voice your question rather than typing it in the chat, you can type the word hand or question into the chat, and then unmute your microphone if you want to ask your question that way. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat bar at any time to type your question, and we'll make sure we address it during the Q&A. That'll begin between 9:20 and 9:30. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Katie. Katie and Dina, do you feel that we have most of our registered visitors in attendance now?
I think it's a good time to start, Em. Yep.
Awesome, great. All right, so for the final time, my name is Emily Denoncourt. I'm the Assistant Director of Admission here at Landmark. I've been a member of the admission office for 15 years, but I've also been a member of the Landmark community for my whole life because both of my parents have worked at the Landmark Elementary Middle School campus for many years. And growing up, spending time on the elementary middle school campus, I always had a strong sense of the deeply compassionate and student-centered community that it is. But I just want to add that if there's any silver lining to the circumstances that we are all living through right now, I think it's being able to witness the beauty of communities coming together and supporting each other. And it has been amazing to witness this community coming together to support each other, the collaboration and innovation regarding our curriculum and our program details. It's been constant and it's ongoing right now throughout the summer. So we're excited to share with you today the values, the teaching principles, and the teaching methods that have shaped this community. And at this point, I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen with you so that you can view the presentation that we have for you. So just a moment while I do that. And so I do want to directly address some of the uncertainty that we're all facing about the coming school year. Like all schools right now, Landmark is working hard on a plan to open the school year while also crafting plans that will allow us to adapt throughout the year to the unpredictable nature of the current health crisis. These plans will prioritize both our students' educational needs as well as the health and safety of our entire community. Based on all the information we have right now, we're looking to open the year with a hybrid model that will alternate a week of remote learning and a week of on-campus learning. And as I mentioned before, a little bit later, we'll be joined by some campus administrators, including our head of the elementary middle school, Claire Sullivan, who can also provide a brief overview of the current plan. These plans are a work in progress, but it's important to note that the remote portion will include a full schedule of live classes that will mirror the on-campus school day. And the schedule will include our daily one-on-one tutorial, a class that is a hallmark of a Landmark education, and it's a class that we'll talk quite a bit more about later in the presentation as well. So having said all that, Again, our goal today is to leave you with a strong sense of what makes Landmark unique. The learning profile of our students, our teaching principles, our approach to learning, the focus areas of our curriculum. So these are the values and principles that will guide our planning as we navigate the current challenges. So let's jump in and begin with a brief history of our program. Landmark was founded.
Emily, I'm sorry to interrupt. At the bottom of the screen, can you just hit the hide button so we can see the full? Perfect. And for those of you, hopefully Emily's PowerPoint presentation is taking up the majority of your screen. But if for some reason it's not, if you scroll to the middle of your screen, you'll find a little thumbtack, and that will allow you to pin it so that it's centered in your screen. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. So Landmark was founded in 1971 by a man named Dr. Charles Drake. Dr. Drake was a diagnostician as well as an educator, and he was also dyslexic. He grew up struggling with his own reading and writing skills, and by the time he reached early adulthood, he had developed several strategies and techniques to help him get by. One of these strategies involved breaking down the task of reading into its smallest possible parts and then working to master each of those parts step by step. This approach accomplished two really important things for our discussion today. One, it gave him firsthand knowledge of what those underlying skills truly are that allow our brains to sound out words, retrieve spelling rules, read sentences fluently and automatically. And two, it allowed him to create small, manageable goals for himself. As he accomplished each goal, he noticed that each experience of success, no matter how small, increased his confidence and his motivation to keep going. He recognized just how important that motivation piece was because this skill development, this process of learning to read and write, was truly difficult for him despite his significant intellect and his many strengths. So Dr. Drake's experience supporting his own literacy development went on to inform the foundational teaching principles that we still use to this day. Landmark School educates bright students with language-based learning disabilities by explicitly identifying and breaking down the underlying skills needed to read and write, and by micro-uniting instruction, which means breaking down skills, information, and assignments into small, manageable chunks. This allows us to create attainable goals for our students, and it's how we provide many opportunities for our students to experience academic success. And these successes naturally increase motivation and help our students to reinvest in and re-engage with their own learning. So in 1971, we opened our doors to about 40 students. This year, we opened the school year with over 475 students enrolled on 2 separate campuses. Our presentation today focuses on our elementary middle school. This is a day school serving students in grades 2 through 8. This year's enrollment was 165 students, and that includes an elementary program of 51 students in grades 2 through 5, and a middle school program of 114 students in grades 6, 7, and 8. We also have a separate high school campus located 3 miles away from our elementary middle school. It has a day program as well as a boarding option with a wonderful residential curriculum. So who are the students who come to Landmark? Landmark students are bright. They are intellectually curious, creative thinkers, good problem solvers with unique ideas, the ability to make interesting connections between their ideas or between concepts they've learned about in their own life experiences. Landmark students are also well-adjusted, which means that they generally get along well with peers and adults, and they're generally able to manage their day-to-day experiences and the typical stressors that go along with being a kid these days. Having said that, certainly some Landmark students are dealing with some school-related anxiety or lowered self-esteem related to their previous school experiences. But once they're in this learning environment with teachers who care about them and understand how they learn and are meeting them where they are, they have that emotional readiness and resilience and motivation to face their challenges and really work on the skills that are hardest for them. And all students attending Landmark School have been diagnosed with something called a language-based learning disability. This is an umbrella term that encompasses a number of different terms or diagnoses you may have heard. It includes the IEP category of specific learning disability in reading or in writing. In terms of diagnoses you may see on a neuropsychological evaluation, it includes specific learning disorder with impairment in reading, also known as dyslexia, or specific learning disorder with impairment in writing, also known as dysgraphia. It can also encompass a diagnosis of a language disorder. In particular, one that we see on evaluations is a receptive expressive language disorder. When it comes to language disorders and language processing, they're typically characterized in terms of receptive language versus expressive language. Our students have stronger receptive language, so that refers to that ability to take in and comprehend the concepts and ideas that language is conveying. So our students struggle a bit more in the expressive realm, that ability to get those ideas back out, whether it be speaking or in writing. And when it comes to language processing overall, there's that distinction between processing the sounds of language, processing the visual patterns of language, which is a struggle for our students, versus their strength in processing those ideas and concepts of language. So we'll also talk in detail about the cognitive profile of our students. And so the terms on this slide can be found in different types of evaluations. If your child has had a psychoeducational evaluation through a school district or a neuropsychological evaluation done privately, there's a particular test called the WISC, the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, that is the cognitive assessment that we require to help us figure out if our curriculum is going to be the right fit. These terms will look familiar if your child has had that assessment. So the areas of strength, start with verbal comprehension, which we've already talked a bit about, but that strong conceptual understanding of the world around them. This ability to process these unique ideas and make connections, to categorize and associate ideas. So perhaps your child loves stories. You hear them connecting something that they heard in a story or saw in a movie to an experience in their own life. Or maybe they love the concepts they're learning in science, like a nature science concept, and you take them on a hike and they connect something they see on the hike out in nature to a nature science concept that they learned about. Visual spatial perception and organization. This refers to the ability to perceive spatial relationships, to work their way through visual information. So hands-on activities like building with Legos or woodworking or sculpting with clay or building a fort are great examples of activities that use visual spatial perception, that ability to envision something in their minds and then be able to build or create it or put the pieces together to create that vision. Fluid reasoning. A strength in the area of fluid reasoning has a little bit more to do with logical thinking and problem-solving ability. So the ability to generalize information from a specific context to a larger context, or the ability to recognize a visual pattern and predict what comes next. This area of thinking is also tied to math reasoning and understanding number concepts. And so then there are cognitive areas of difficulty that our students are struggling with that are the underlying causes of the reading and writing difficulties that they are having. So these areas fall in working memory and or processing speed. So working memory refers to that ability to hold on to information in the forefront of our minds and be able to work with that information in the moment. It refers to both visual memory and auditory memory. And so you can imagine just in day-to-day life, a struggle with working memory, being able to auditorily hold on to a lot of oral directions in the classroom that might be given, or visually to have to be processing a lot of visual information, maybe taking notes from the blackboard or copying down information, maybe going from one document to another on a computer. Just the efficiency of that can really be affected by working memory. And so relatedly, processing speed here has to do with the efficiency of visual processing, of being able to very quickly make a connection between a visual symbol and what it means, or being able to scan across a row of visual symbols and very quickly determine if you're seeing two of the same symbol. And so these are foundational skills for reading and writing, that the brain's ability to make that automatic connection between a visual symbol and the sound it makes, and a visual symbol or a pattern of letters and the sounds that they make. And similarly, if you can imagine how that would then affect the writing process. So this is also connected to a term called rapid naming. So if you've seen rapid naming on your child's diagnostic testing, that is very much connected to this definition of processing speed, that automatic ability to name letters, to name numbers and objects. I also just want to explain that the cognitive profile of our students in general falls in the average to above average range. So when we think about these areas of strength and these areas of difficulty, they are all hovering around that average to above average range. So the areas of strength would be more in that above average range. The areas of difficulty would typically be in the low average to perhaps just below average range. So this next slide is a video, and I'm not going to play it right now because we've learned that videos do not translate well to the Google Meet format. However, you will be receiving this video in a follow-up email, and it's also available on the testimonials page of our website. So if you have an opportunity to view it, it includes direct comments from our students, interviews with them where they get a chance to talk about the transformation that they've seen in themselves. So it's really a wonderful video to watch. We will now switch over to a discussion of our curriculum. So Landmark's curriculum is skills-based. And so that means that as a school, philosophically, we are meeting the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. We are functioning in terms of those frameworks and thinking about the content areas defined by those frameworks in terms of our lesson planning and curriculum development. But our focus and our emphasis is on building up and filling in the gaps of the reading and writing skills that our students need to work on. So we're using content to really facilitate that skill building. That is the explicit and direct focus of our work here. And one of the ways that we do this is class placement by ability level and learning profile. So when we think about grouping students in classes at Landmark, and these are small groupings, we'll talk about that in just a moment, but these are small groupings of typically 5 to 7 students. And so these students are grouped together with reading and writing skill level taken into account and different aspects of their learning profile taken into account. We do think about age and grade. So for example, a 2nd grader will not be in class with a 5th grader. It would typically be one grade up or down, like a grouping of 2nd and 3rd graders together, a grouping of 4th and 5th graders. For middle school, there could be a grouping of 7th and 8th graders, another grouping of 6th or 7th graders, but it would be unusual for a 6th grader to be in class with an 8th grader, for example. And so all of our classes are considered to be language-based classrooms. A language-based classroom focuses on the 4 areas of literacy. It's reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And so this small size really allows for that direct and explicit instruction, that ability for the teacher to check in with all of the students that they have in front of them and be making sure that that class also because it's grouped based on learning profile and skill level, they're moving through material at a pace that is the right pace for the students in that class. And these class sizes, so for elementary, the typical class size is 4 to 7 students. For middle school, it's typically 6 to 8 students. Landmark's faculty, we have a really low student-teacher ratio, so there are a lot of faculty here supporting the number of students that we have, 3 students to every 1 faculty member. In addition, 78% of our teachers have their master's degree in mild to moderate special needs, and Landmark is a teacher training institute, which means that if teachers come to us and they do not yet have that master's degree in mild to moderate special needs, they are enrolled in a master's degree program where professors are coming onto campus and are teaching our faculty so that they can be working towards that degree if they do not yet have it. Another unique feature of Landmark is the role of the academic advisor. So this faculty role is a much more involved version of any advisor that you might find in another setting. So the academic advisor at Landmark really carefully oversees a student's academic schedule, thinking about class placement and class groupings, thinking about if a particular class grouping is the right level of challenge for that student in that particular subject area, and thinking about how their learning profile is presenting once a student is here. The academic advisor works closely with the one-on-one tutor that a student has. And again, we will talk in much more detail about that one-on-one tutorial class. But that academic advisor can act as a faculty mentor for the tutorial teacher, somebody who can collaborate and think about the different methodologies that are brought into the tutorial. And the academic advisor is also the main contact for parents. So they can act as a liaison between parents and your child's teachers. If you have a question, it can be easier to just reach out directly to the academic advisor, and they will talk to teachers. They can arrange for you to communicate directly with teachers, but they'll get back to you within a 24-hour period with any communication or question that you have. So for the next part of the presentation, we're going to move into a specific discussion of many of the classes that we offer here. The classes listed here are all of the classes that a student will have as part of their program here. So the one-on-one tutorial, language arts, and oral expression literature. One thing I want to emphasize is that I think in a typical program, many students would have one class period that focuses on language arts skill building. But at Landmark, since that is our focus, this language processing, development of reading and writing skills, that language arts skill building is spread over 3 different periods of a student's day. So they have the one-on-one tutorial class that's directly addressing those skills, really being able to highly personalize the skills that need the most work in that tutorial class. The language arts class that focuses on written expression, on the writing process. And then oral expression and literature, where we also work on students' ability to express themselves, to organize their ideas orally, and we use stories, poetry, elements of literature to help facilitate those discussions. And then to round out the core curriculum, all of our students have math, science, and social studies. There's a block where they will have phys ed and elective classes, and we'll talk about those options a little bit later. And then elementary students have a block within their day that is for the purpose of enrichment, and those are more like time for fun project-based activities or discussions, perhaps a craft project relating to a theme from a science or social studies unit. So it's an opportunity for those elementary students to have some additional project-based learning scheduled into their day. So the one-on-one tutorial, as I've mentioned a few times now, this is the hallmark of a landmark education. The tutorial provides intensive remediation of the specific reading and writing skills that each student needs to work on. And we carefully determine the goals, the specific skills that we want to target in the tutorial, looking at all of the application materials that we've reviewed, the diagnostic testing that a student has had, school records, and we also can do our own screening and assessment once a student is here to really individualize the goals of that curriculum. The skills, the continuum of skills that the tutorial encompasses includes phonemic awareness, so that core ability to connect the the individual sounds of language with their symbols, being able to decode, to sound out words, recognizing linguistic patterns, so being able to understand syllable types, being able to recognize typical spelling patterns and irregular spelling patterns, reading fluency, so building up the rate and accuracy of their oral reading, and then the higher order comprehension of language, as well as the writing process, the spelling and the organizing and sequencing of written composition. So this is an individualized curriculum. So it's important to note that Landmark does not adhere to any one curriculum. We're not considered to be an Orton Gillingham school or a Wilson program. These are tutorials that are really individualized based on a number of different methodologies that we can draw from. And these are just a few. There really is a long list of methodologies that we have available to think about in bringing in different options for students as they work their way through their skill development. The Linda Mood Bell Lips program focusing on phonemic awareness, Let's Read, neurolinguistic readers to work on phonics and linguistic patterns, Read Naturally, Great Leaps for fluency, as well as materials authored by Landmark faculty, because as our faculty has developed curriculum and collaborated over the almost 50 years of our history, they have been able to share that information with each other. So language arts is a class that really focuses carefully on the writing process. This is a class with a highly structured approach. So they use thematic units. These are units that would introduce a broad topic. So for example, Shackleton's exploration of Antarctica, or the history of the Hershey Candy Company. So these thematic units provide a framework for the generation of ideas and vocabulary that the class can then use to collaborate together on developing their writing skills. There's a very significant use of graphic organizers at every level of development. So at the sentence level, the paragraph level, eventually at the level of a multi-paragraph essay. And I think much more so than any other language arts program that you'll encounter, there's a huge emphasis on sentence development. If you walk into one of our language arts classes, you will very likely see that the class is working together collaboratively to write a sentence that will emphasize the kernel structure of that sentence, the function of the words, the correct sequencing of those words, and then being able to add on to that kernel structure with elaboration, with vocabulary, with the emphasis on how that elaboration can make students' writing as powerful as they want it to be, and really help them to understand the functionality of the words in a sentence. And so, you know, that I emphasize this because I've spoken with a number of parents who just mention that they, you know, sentence writing is introduced in every language arts class anywhere, but I think it often gets introduced as, you know, subject and predicate, and there's a little bit of sentence diagramming, and then the curriculum moves on. And what we've found is that it's so vital for our students to get this explicit and daily work on the understanding the function of words in a sentence, and really solidifying that skill to then be able to take that to the paragraph and multi-paragraph essay writing level. I also want to talk a little bit about cursive, because Landmark as an institution, philosophically, we believe that it is important to continue the teaching of cursive, knowing that a number of other programs have moved away from that. At Landmark, we believe there are a few reasons why the teaching of this skill is very important. The skill itself is valuable for students that are struggling with some visual language processing difficulties, being able to minimize reversals, being able to chunk information meaningfully by not lifting up your writing utensil between the beginning and end of a word, that fluid connection of the letters, and of creating that cohesive unit of meaning in their minds. But research, brain imaging research, also shows that cursive writing is actually the most effective. Compared with both printing and typing, cursive writing is the most effective in activating language and memory pathways in the brain. And so I think that's an important point to remember, that there's the skill itself and being able to use that skill in day-to-day life, but there's also what the development of that skill does for the brain and does to strengthen the language processing pathways in the brain. And so that is a major reason why we continue to teach it. It's introduced in the one-on-one tutorial, and it is practiced in all of our language arts classes. Landmark also has a class called Oral Expression Literature, and this class focuses on another language processing pathway in the brain, the expressive language processing pathway, which is an equally important pathway to strengthen. And for higher order language processing, being able to comprehend information, to kind of crystallize your thoughts. If you ever have experienced that moment where you just needed to talk something out to really be able to understand it and kind of get that moment, that crystallized moment in your mind where you understand something because you talked it through, that you've experienced the importance of that oral expression pathway. So the specific skills that this class works on include narrative sequencing, being able to tell a story in an organized way, being able to compare and contrast information, explaining a process or a procedure, sharing an opinion appropriately. So although this class certainly works primarily on verbal skills, there is some incorporation of nonverbal pragmatics as well. So students are able to work a bit on thinking about body language, thinking about the message that they're conveying, how it's being received in terms of tone, in terms of volume of voice and eye contact. So there's that element of pragmatics that's incorporated a bit as well. So math at Landmark is, it's tactile, which means that it's very hands-on, kinesthetic, which means that it involves body movement, students moving their bodies to help reinforce and internalize concepts, and it's highly visual. This is a curriculum that was developed by Christopher Wooden, who is the head of our math department, and he has developed this curriculum very specifically to support students with language-based learning difficulties, thinking about the impact of working memory and being able to use visuals and meaningfully chunk information to take the burden off of working memory, and thinking about the need for that multisensory, kinesthetic, visual, tactile support. So I'll just give two quick examples of our math curriculum. An example I observed at the elementary level, students were working on subtraction using large icon cards. Icons here refer to images of dots representing numbers like you would see on dice. So during the lesson, I observed they were using cards with 1 dot up through 5 dots, and each student had the opportunity to select 2 cards, And the class helped them figure out what those two cards added up to. Then they laid the cards on the ground and then took one away while practicing the language of what they were doing out loud. So if they chose 4 and 5, they would say 9 minus 4 equals 5, while physically removing the 4 dot icon card, kinesthetically reinforcing that concept that subtraction means take away. So then an example at the middle school level, I observed the teaching of the equation for slope. So the class was using a huge grid made of rope with an X and a Y axis, and this grid took up an entire wall. It was huge. The vertical ropes on the grid were actually pulleys that the students could use to hoist colorful flags up to plot points on a grid. And each student had the opportunity to plug a number into the equation, calculate the point, count over to the appropriate flag, and then hoist it up to the right point. So once all the students had taken a turn, they could see that their flags all lined up in a sloping line that showed the shape of the equation they were working with. So I don't know about you, but I just remember using graphing calculators for a lot of my math curriculum in school, and we would plug the equation into the calculator, hit enter, and see an image appear on the screen. And that was fine for what it was, but this was amazing to see that these students physically and collaboratively were creating that image, forming such a meaningful connection to the concept that they were learning. So technology at Landmark, obviously this is for everyone becoming a more and more important topic. I first just want to talk sort of globally about our philosophy regarding technology, specifically assistive technology. At Landmark, we think of technology as an educational tool, so not something used to bypass reading and writing skill development. So there may be other programs that use some text-to-speech or speech-to-print software that are helping students to access curriculum in a larger classroom setting. But here at Landmark, we feel that students, first of all, they don't need that to access the curriculum because of the small class sizes and the direct and explicit instruction they're receiving, but also because our goal is truly to develop those skills themselves, to improve these underlying reading and writing skills, and to provide our students every opportunity to practice those skills while we have them here in our program. I also want to talk a little bit about digital citizenship. So we've had a digital citizenship curriculum, and so that this curriculum spans a range of skills from elementary up through middle school. So at the younger grades, things like password creation and safety, and then moving into email etiquette and expectations. In the older grades, things like sharing information online, identifying reliable sources, media balance, and well-being. I think that, as we all are adjusting to using devices as a form of communication more and more, we are thinking more about what that means for our students. And so, even having conversations with them about, building friendships and social connections using technology, thinking about which formats are most appropriate. Is it the same thing to be communicating over social media as it is to be setting up a direct FaceTime or a Zoom or a Google Meet with somebody to connect with them that way? So really, thinking about this digital world that we are all using so much more these days. And then Google Classroom and Google Meet. We have been using Google Classroom for a while, which is the interface that students have to access online documents and to be organizing class materials, working collaboratively, sharing information with their teacher. And then for our live lessons for remote learning, we have been using Google Meet, and we plan to continue doing that. It provides sort of this is what we're using right now, and it provides a simpler interface, a little bit simpler than Zoom, to be able to sort of minimize distractions and connect with our students in that way. So The elective classes at Landmark, these are, this is a list of options that we have provided, and certainly as we look at the year ahead, we're still working on what electives we can offer. But so typically students have received physical education every other day. And so that gym class, that's an opportunity for students to be active and also to work on not only their health and fitness and nutrition, but also to be working on some communication skills as well. And the other classes, other elective classes include visual art, more hands-on art, digital art, working with iPads and 3D pens, woodworking, small engine repair, where students are learning to take apart a typical small engine and put it back together, practical arts, which involves both woodworking, creating a vehicle, and then the small engine area where students can put engines on the vehicles that they create. Kids Around the Globe, which is a class where students learn about children living in other countries, the traditions and the different aspects of their life, and it focuses on highlighting profiles in courage, so children who have just done amazing things and shown great courage and bravery all over the globe. Music class, where students can learn different instruments. We have small ensemble groups that work together to play music with an emphasis on rhythm and timing. Students can try out instruments even if they've never played them before, including ukulele, guitar, piano, bass, and drums. And then bike repair, so learning to repair and maintain a bicycle. So the daily schedule here, this is also a work in progress for the coming school year. So I do want to emphasize that this will shift a little bit just in terms of some of the details, but this is, this is fairly relevant to what we will see for the coming year. There are 8 periods. There have been 8 periods of the day. So the 6 academic classes that we talked about, an elective period and a lunch period. 47-minute classes, which might be shifting to just similar, but maybe 45-minute classes, a 30-minute lunch, and typically 5 minutes between classes. The after-school activity timeframe is also under discussion right now for the coming school year, but in the past, that's been daily, Monday through Thursday, 3:15 to 4:30. And we've offered different after-school clubs, and these are listed here. In the interests of time, I won't go through them now, but they're on our website. And we also have had an after-school sports program that you can also learn more about on the website. So homework at Landmark, this is an important topic in terms of our philosophy on homework. We believe that it should be a practice and review of skills and content that were already introduced and taught to the point of independence in the classroom. It's a reinforcement of daily lessons, and students, the goal is that students should be able to complete homework assignments on their own without help from their parents. So that philosophically is our approach to homework, and it's a great question to ask our student panelists just in terms of their experience with Landmark homework. So this is another video that I'm going to skip over, but it's also available on our website. This particular video is about our summer program. We did have to cancel our summer program this summer, but we are extremely hopeful, looking forward to being able to have it up and running next summer, 2021. The overall structure is 3 academic classes that mimic the classes that we've already talked about in terms of language skill development and language processing. So it includes the one-on-one tutorial, it includes a language arts class focusing on the writing process, and it includes a language structure class and literature class using literature as a way to facilitate oral expression skills. There's work with poetry, work with the overall structure of language. And then there's afternoon activity programs that have changed a bit from year to year, but these are just a few examples of what we have included over the years. The explorations program, where students have had the opportunity to go snorkeling and do marine science exploration and go kayaking. Adventure ropes, we have a ropes course on campus to help our students develop their confidence and communication and trust building while having fun. And the creations program, where we have combined some art projects, both digital art and some visual art, along with improv drama. So being able to work on improv, acting skills, scene development, character development. And finally, a mountain biking program where students would have the opportunity to go biking. We have some trails around campus, and they would also get to learn some of the bike maintenance and repair skills that we teach in that elective class that we have. So that is our presentation, and I know it's just about 9:30, so I want to switch back and stop sharing my screen with you so that we can switch over to the Q&A session and welcome the students and administrators who have joined us. Just a moment while I do that.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's already some questions in the chat bar, which is great. Please keep them coming. As a number of our administrators, faculty have signed on, and we can jump in with some questions. Before we start the Q&A, perhaps, Bob, would you like to say, give an introduction?
Yes, thanks, Katie. There's very little to say.
Turn your video off.
Turn my video off.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Technology. There's
Sorry,
very little to say. Are we good?
Let's see. No video yet. Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's always very little to say after Emily does her detailed presentation. Nice job, Emily. What I want to say is, as I describe Landmark, for 50 years, Landmark has been developing a medical model which is stronger in my mind than an educational model. So it's diagnostic and it's prescriptive. So if somebody applies to Landmark, we ask for so much testing, we do more testing. We want to make sure we're the right school for the students who come to us in terms of the diagnosis. But then that testing becomes the tool that our academic advisors, that our department heads, that our teachers use to set up a special customized remedial program for each student. So the diagnostic prescriptive piece in the medical model is when one goes to the doctor for a diagnosis, you get treated, if you will, for what they diagnose. When a student comes here, we develop a customized program based on their learning needs. So if there are 470 students in our school, they all have a different program. In the tutorial, it's customized. It's based on what their learning strengths are, what their challenges are. And that program continues to move through the classes in the tutorial based on the development of skills. So to me, it's a maximum opportunity for our teachers to reach every student. And it's a maximum opportunity for our students to learn because they're being met where they are. They're being seen for who they are as a learner. They're using their strengths to overcome their challenges. And it's different for every student. So we're not a Lindenwood Bell school. We're not a Norton Gillingham school. We're not a anything school. We're an everything school. We can bring any program to a student based on that student's needs. And that's the way we love to work. And so who teaches these kids? Our teachers have had extensive training from us. The training is ongoing, but all of our teachers also have to have a master's degree with moderate special needs certification that we provide for them if they don't have it. It comes through Boston University. So our teachers are constantly learning, constantly training, and they've been trained in this diagnostic prescriptive model. So that's the Landmark that I love because I know that every student here is being seen as an individual, taught as an individual, and can move as quickly as possible through the learning process and how to access curriculum. So that's what I see coming from my teachers all the time, from our administrators. And I just want to give you that big picture of how we function. We're unlike any other school in that we don't have any stock program that every student gets. We get an individualized program for every student. And that's sort of what makes the difference here at Landmark. And I'm happy to answer any questions at any time. So I just wanted to give that overview of how I see our Landmark.
Thank you, Bob. Before we start going through some of the questions in the chat, I figured it might be nice to introduce the elementary middle school administrators and faculty who are going to be answering some of these questions. And then we'll also introduce our two students who have joined us. So I think first, Claire Sullivan, would you like to say a quick hello?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. It's so nice to be able to see all your faces and hopefully answer all your questions as best as we can.
And Claire is the head of the elementary middle school, and she's wonderful. Megan, did you want to say a quick hello, Megan Stevens?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Stevens. I'm the reading supervisor and testing coordinator at the elementary middle school. So I kind of work on all aspects of tutorial and assessment, all the things everyone loves.
I think I saw Kirk Swanson. Kirk, can you say good morning?
Yes, thank you, Katie. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kirk Swanson. I'm the Dean of Students at the Landmark Elementary Middle School, and I'm so happy you're all here today with us. I wish we could be in person. I'm excited we have our students here today, too, to join us. I'm in charge of, along with Tara Jolie Loudermilk, the Assistant Dean of Students, who we get to meet in a minute. We're in charge of student life. We get involved with it, kids and staff, and keep our hand in the pie and make sure people are doing all right. And so I'm glad you're here today, and I look forward to getting to know you, if you join us. Thank you very much. Thanks, Katie.
Tara, can you say hello?
Sure, yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. As Mr. Swanson just said, I'm the Assistant Dean of Students. I'm also responsible for the athletic program for our middle schoolers, which is our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So we can definitely answer questions about that. And I know that there was a question about dress code, so we can definitely address that in a little bit as well. That is something that Kirk Swanson and I work with our students and families on as well. But I know you're going to introduce them, but I see their faces and I'm very excited. So just a wave to Bo and Marie. Hey guys, thanks for being here.
Yay, they're so brave. Bo, would you like to go first? Maybe just say your name, your grade, how long you've been at Landmark, and then we'll introduce you, Marie.
Okay, sure. I'm Bo. I'm going into the 7th grade. I just had my previous year, my first year at Landmark, and yeah.
Bo, would you mind sharing what town you're from?
I'm from Hamilton.
Great. Thank you for being here with us. Marie, would you say a quick hello?
Yeah, I'm Marie. I'm going into 5th grade, and this is my first year, and I'm from Hamilton.
Thank you, guys. It's great to see you. Okay, so lots of good questions popping up in the chat. Let's see, where should we start? Maybe we'll jump into dress code since it was already referenced. I'll direct this question to Bo and Marie, and then Tara and Kirk, perhaps you can jump in if you have anything else to supplement. Marie, the question specifically was about shoes and if you can wear Converse sneakers to school. Do you know the answer to that off the top of your head?
I think you can, but you can wear like mostly any shoes. You just can't wear flip-flops.
Great, awesome, thank you. Hey, Bo, can you elaborate on the dress code? Anything else you feel like families should know about what students need to wear to campus?
You can't wear like normal hoodies. You have to wear hoodies that say Landmark on them, or you can wear like quarter zips.
Great. In terms of our deans, anything you guys want to add to the dress code information?
I do have a question for Bo and Marie, because dress code is a very hot topic for students. Could you just say, do you feel like it's hard to follow the dress code? Like, do you find yourselves trying to go through your closets a lot, trying to figure out what to wear? Or do you feel like it's pretty easy to follow?
I think it's very easy to follow. It's not really that hard. Just collared shirt and dress pants or dress shorts.
And
The same way-
Katie, oh, sorry, Bo, go ahead. So just as Tara mentioned and Bo mentioned, it's pretty simple dress code. We just want, as we all do when we go to work, we want kids to be in work attire, obviously not a tie or anything like that, but in business, for school. And if there's any concerns with dress code, it's very easy. We talk to the students and it's not a big deal. But it's pretty simple to follow when it's in the handbook. And anytime parents or students have questions, can reach out to one of us or any faculty member. We'd be glad to help you with that.
Great. Emily, there was a question specific to speech as it relates to our profile of students. I'm not sure if you saw that, but maybe you could speak to our, fill in any gaps in terms of the presentation about our delivery of speech at Landmark.
Sure. Yeah, so we have a speech language pathologist on staff who consults with our faculty and is thinking about methodologies that can be brought into both the one-on-one tutorial setting or the oral expression class. So there are absolutely opportunities for our students to be working on those skills. Having said that, when we look at an application at the admission stage, we are looking carefully at the specific primary needs for a student. And so students that are coming to Landmark where our curriculum is the right fit, the primary need is in the realm of reading and writing skills. And so there may be some struggles with speech, especially in their history. There may be some continued struggles relating to that phonemic awareness and phonological processing. And so that is absolutely incorporated into the curriculum here, but we're not offering direct speech services to students as part of their typical schedule.
Thank you for clarifying that. Bo, this question might be really good for you. It's about transitioning into the middle school. So the parent says, obviously that can be kind of a challenging transition. Can you talk about, how you were feeling about joining Landmark, and maybe if Landmark did anything to make you feel more comfortable joining this community?
Yeah, so on the first day of school, we didn't actually do school. On the first day of school, you just went in and you did activities and did stuff and already, and there was a ton of new middle schoolers already going, and so you just made friends very quickly.
Great. Yeah, that touches on another question about from Kayla. Kayla's going to be joining us in the fall, and she's great. She'll be a good friend for you guys. But Kayla wanted to know, when we start, is there someone who's going to show her around, and how will she know where to go? Marie, do you want to talk about that first day and how you get integrated into the Landmark?
Well, on the first day, you meet your homeroom teacher, and the homeroom teacher takes you around, and she shows you, or he shows you, all around campus, and that's how you figure out where you're going. But then after you're finished going, you also get to talk to the people that are there, and you get to they tell you what you should do whenever you need to come to that spot.
Marie, do you have a sense of how long it took you to get comfortable, feeling like you really knew where the whole campus layout?
Well, I did the summer school, and so I was more comfortable when I came to school. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you guys. That was really good. So this question, I'll see if our students can address it, and then maybe some of our administrators can jump in. The most recent question was asking about the differences between Landmark's model and versus public school, where you might have more of a substantially separate classroom model. I'm not sure, Minogues, if that's the case you were coming from, where you were doing pullouts in your school. Could you maybe speak to what how you were receiving special education before coming to Landmark? That's a complicated question, sorry. Do you get what I'm asking, Bo?
Yeah, me and Marie were both homeschooled before we came to Landmark.
Gotcha. So I'll have more of the administrators jump in on this question about sort of our model as it compares to separate classrooms. Maybe Claire, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'm happy to start. And Megan, if you want to add. What's different about our program, as Bob and Emily have both outlined, is first the one-on-one tutorial is really unique because that's going to be tailored. That's a whole class period every single day that's tailored specifically to your child's reading needs. So they're covering, anything to do with language with regards to comprehension or decoding, spelling. 47 minutes every single day, one-on-one, that the academic advisor, who's another person on campus, that kind of observes your child's program and keeps them in charge of testing and the actual programming that's occurring in that tutorial. What's also different is that we take a typical English class at Landmark. It's split amongst 3 different periods. So there's the one-on-one tutorial. Then they have a class that's called Language Arts that's solely dedicated to just the written expression piece. And then there's a whole little class, a whole entire period that's focused on the oral expression literature component. So they're really getting 3 different periods in their day that are focused on that English language component that a typical public school or another setting, they're only maybe getting 1 class period for. Another big difference is just the way our population works and the way we do scheduling. We group our students based on the same levels of processing speed, or students with attentional needs or decoding are all within clusters. So they're with students that are similar to them with regards to what they are feeling challenged with academically and also what they're really successful with. So it's not a mixed classroom with regards to what the needs are. Teachers are really able to differentiate instruction and tailor instruction to individuals within the classroom, but those individuals are all on the same path with regards to ultimately what they need with regards to written expression or study skills or that oral expression piece. So you really see more of a homogeneous group due to our intensive scheduling that we do every summer, where we look at so many different components. So I don't know if Megan wants to add anything specifically to that about the tutorial or.
Yeah, I think you really covered it, but I would say the layer on top of that is that we're scheduling the same every day. So it's not like that tutorial is coming out of social studies time or their elective time. Every student has it built into their schedule. So everyone's kind of on the same playing field. A lot of our kids come and say, oh, I'm not different here, because all of my peers, even if they're in different classes, are similar to them in profile and the way that they interact, and they don't have to change their schedule to meet their needs. We've already done that by how we schedule our program.
Megan, can I ask a follow-up question from the chat, specifically about how you would place a student who's 4th grade reading at a 7th grade level, 2nd grade math with spelling and executive function needs, like kind of talking through how we can meet the needs of students with varying skill levels?
Yeah, I think scheduling is a much more complex picture than you normally think of. In a public school, they're really confined to grade level and thinking about we have a certain number and we just break them up this way and that's where the kids go. our scheduling really takes into account the kids' profiles, and we would schedule an elementary math class separately from an elementary core class, which is based more on literacy skills. But then, as Claire mentioned already, we're taking into account their written expressions. So we're really looking at the whole child, not just a single piece, to make a decision about scheduling. And we will place them with different peers based on what they need at different times.
Thank you. There was a great question about remote learning, and I think I'll start with the students speaking to this. The question was, how does Landmark keep younger students particularly engaged when you're needing to do classes on the computer? So I'm wondering, Bo and Marie, maybe Bo can start, but thinking about talking about your experience with remote learning at Landmark, and if you were able to feel like you could focus and attend to what the teachers were asking you.
I liked it. It was not the best. I would rather go to school like normally because you learn more. It's more productive. But online school is definitely is probably as good as you're gonna get because it's some of the time you just lose focus or like the computer doesn't work. But most of the time, the majority of the time, your class is just going normally online.
Thanks, Bo. Marie, do you have anything to add about your experience with the online learning?
Yeah, it was kind of easy for me because I had already been homeschooled, and so I was used to it. But I agree with Bo. If you go to school, you're more productive, and you learn more, and you can't like glitch out like you could on a computer.
Yeah, absolutely. Marie, were there any activities or lessons that you felt were really cool that your teachers were able to still do digitally in a similar way to how they might have been done in a classroom?
Well, my math teacher, she did a Quizlet thing for us, and we also did that in class, and so did my tutorial teacher.
Great. Megan, maybe you could speak to how we're able to make, especially thinking about the tutorial, multi-sensory and keeping up with those practices even when students are engaging via the computer.
Sure. And I think the first thing I'd like to say is kind of in a global sense, we've found that the most productive use of time is to use Google Meets so that if and when we have remote aspects, we're going to be delivering those in interactive Google Meets, not these asynchronous independent assignments, so that we are kind of catching the attention of our students and getting more feedback for ourselves. In the sense of tutorial, honestly, we found that there were a lot of things that were kind of seamlessly done. Our faculty is really incredible and innovative, and we use a lot of collaboration. So weekly, we were meeting together and saying, all right, I needed to do a phonemic awareness activity where my kid is using blocks. What are you doing? So we use kind of being able to track sounds using manipulatives. And we found that people had different online sources to do that so that you could use apps for kids to move with their mouse or their finger if they're using an iPad. And then we had other teachers saying, that doesn't work for my student. So I had them build blocks, and they were doing that in front of the camera for me so that we were using a different type of manipulation. So we've been really creative to have hands-on aspects, especially in that one-on-one where you get the direct feedback of how is your student responding and what else do I need to give. So that might be in a fully virtual using apps and other types of technology, or we might be asking a kid to pick up a pencil and write a word down and show it to us on screen. So there are lots of ways that you can get a lot done in a one-on-one setting.
Thank you. Back to the students. So Bo and Marie, the question was, let me see if I can find it. One of the families on the call have boys who would be going into 5th and 7th grade. They want to know what your first year was like, and so just generally talking about your experience being new to Landmark and how that went.
Landmark was the first. I went to the summer program as well, but I was a little bit familiar with like the campus, and I knew a couple kids there. But Landmark was very welcoming, and everyone was nice, and all the teachers. And then you just made friends very quickly, and it was very nice, awesome.
Marie, what about you?
Well, it was easy because I already knew a couple people, and I kind of knew my teacher beforehand, and the teachers and the students there are really welcoming, so it's really easy to make friends. And when you go, you feel like that you don't belong here. You feel like you do because there's so many people that are welcoming.
Oh, that's great to hear. Just to follow up with you guys, I would love for you guys to share what electives you've been involved with at Landmark, and then if you do any of the after-school activities, I'm sure families would be interested to hear what else you're involved in outside of classes at Landmark. Bo, do you want to start?
Sure. I did my electives were I did practical arts, I think. And you like start off with like just building like blocks out of wood and doing the measurements, and then you work your way up. And at the end of the semester, you make a CO2 car, and then you race them. And the other elective that I did was art. Well, I only did half of the art, but art was very enjoyable, and it was just kind of you just did stuff, and then we did pottery, which was really fun, and we used the wheel.
Great. Marie, what was your electives?
I did digital art, which was like art on an iPad where you would use different stencils and you would make more like different art, and you would be able to use, we would have projects that you wanted to use and you wanted to look like it. And digital art, we were making suns and moons. And so my teacher, she told us how to use the stencil, and it's kind of different on an iPad because you're trying to not actually draw, you're trying to make the line like kind of circular. But then I also did Kids Around the Globe. It talks about kids that live in different places and what their life is about, and yeah.
Thank you, guys. So in the interest of time, we've got a lot of really good questions coming in, but I wanted to, if anyone has any burning questions for Marie and Bo, if you want to type those in, because I think what we'll plan to do is dismiss the students soon so they can get on with their summer day, and then keep asking some questions of our administrators. Bo and Marie, you're off the hook for right now, but we'll see if in the next few minutes any more student-centered questions come in, and then I'll let you guys go. So there was another question earlier on about teacher training. So I'm not sure who would like to speak to that, but thinking, letting families know specifically how our teachers are prepared to meet the needs of students with language-based learning disabilities. Maybe Claire?
Absolutely. So when a teacher first begins at Landmark, they go through an extensive summer training. So they teach within our summer program the year before that they would start their first school year. And during that time, they work with Megan and other staff members to get the full Landmark program, to know how we do reading program, writing. Also, if they're going to be in the math department, they'll get math training with regards to that. And then that training is ongoing throughout the year in their first year until the first semester. They have weekly and daily training sessions. And then at the semester change, we continue that throughout their first year, more that extensive teacher training. And then over the course of anyone's career at Landmark, we're constantly providing professional development opportunities. So we have half days where on Fridays where students will go home. Teachers stay on campus, and we do extensive staff trainings. We'll bring in outside speakers, or we'll do in-house in-services. We also have an extensive outreach program that a lot of our staff members are involved in. So that oftentimes occurs over the summer, and our teachers will sign up to take those different courses to learn more about, a study skills course or a reading program, just to enhance their professional development in that regard. I don't know if there's more you want.
No, I think that's great. I think that's great. There was a quick question that just came in about the training for our elective teachers. And just to piggyback off what Claire said, all of our faculty have that same level of expertise supporting students with language-based learning disabilities. It's not unusual for an elective teacher to also be tutoring, so they're very well versed in literacy instruction. So it's hard to decide what to prioritize. I think that the Minogues, you guys were wonderful. Kayla in particular gave you a nice thank you message, and she's looking forward to meeting you, seeing you in the fall. So I'll let you guys go. Thank you again for your bravery speaking to families, and we'll talk to you again soon. And I'll keep going with some of the questions for our administrators.
Bye.
Nice
Thank
job,
you.
guys. Bye, Bo. Bye, Marie. So nice to see students. It's great. Giving up their summer mornings. There was a great question about embracing and celebrating cultural differences. So this came from a family that would be looking at Landmark coming from India and wondering how a student might blend into our community. So I'm not sure who wants to start by fielding that question.
Tara, do you want to start would you like me to begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, honestly, we try to really meet our students where they are and where they're coming from. So we do have a number of students that come from different towns and locations. We don't have a very wide range of diversity within our school currently, but that's not to say that we try to engage our students and welcome them where they're coming from. We definitely celebrate any differences, any different types of cultures. So we are very warm and welcoming in that sense. I think we're constantly working to better ourselves in terms of a faculty and staff, and learning about our students and families and where they're coming from. As a matter of fact, we have a meeting on Friday to continue our diversity and inclusion programming. So, I think I wish our students were still on, because I think if you ask them, our students tend to come to Landmark and they feel that sense of belonging, because they start to realize that people are like them in terms of their learning styles. And I think that they start to feel that level of inclusion in that capacity, if that makes sense.
Can I, Katie, just add one thing too? Thanks, Tara. The other thing, with all our students and faculty, the big push for all of us is that everyone feels safe, part of the community. So we talk a lot about safety, health. We talk about feeling connected. We always talk to the students about if there's any concerns or issues with something, to reach out to their advisor or to one of us, the deans, or any faculty member, but we want everyone to feel that this is my school. I feel proud to be at Landmark. And I think the kids respond to that, but just our key thing is we want people to feel part of the community. As Tara said, we continue to work on that as a faculty.
Thanks, Kurt.
Right. Katie, let me just add a quickie as well. If you take all of Landmark, both campuses, we had students this past year from 20 states, 6 other countries, and 115 cities and towns in Massachusetts. And the difference between us and another private school is that we don't recruit at all. People find us because their sons or daughters are not doing well where they are. So then we do the screening to make sure that we're the right placement. But most of the students who come to us feel different because they're not learning like their peers in other schools, or they may be in those pull-out models where they feel different. And what Landmark does is it levels the playing field. So everybody feels comfortable. Everybody feels met where they are. And both campuses have very active groups working on diversity and inclusion, recruiting for faculty and all of that. But one of the things I hear the most from our students on both campuses is, when I came here, I felt normal again. I felt like part of a community because I'm not different here, and everybody sees me for who I am. So that's a big part of what happens at Landmark.
Thanks, everyone. That was an important question. So in the interest of time, I'm going to try to hit on just a few more themes. And if we don't get to your questions, we're happy to do individual follow-up. But I know people have already dedicated a big chunk of their morning to be with us. So thank you for that. No worries if you need to pop off at any point. But I do want to get to one question that's been asked in a few different ways. It's around transitions. So the question is about how students are preparing to leave Landmark if they're able to be successful in other environments, and then coupled with that, thinking about how many students might transition from the elementary middle school to the high school campus. So if someone was really to talk about transition and maybe even thinking about the roles of our public school liaisons, because we haven't quite mentioned that.
Sure, I can start, and then if anyone else wants to add in as well. What's wonderful about our program that we mentioned earlier is the academic advisor system. So every student is paired with an academic advisor who, as we mentioned earlier, go over the programming and are that direct conduit between the program and the parents. So you'll hear from your academic advisor about how your student's progressing, and that's the person who's kind of your point person with regards to asking questions about classes or class placement or what's going on in the tutorial. And so parents work with the academic advisor in the fall and even through the winter, and then mainly in the spring, to decide what the next steps are. So when students are ready to move on to another placement, the academic advisor is one of those resources that you can depend on to help you talk about, is my child, is it time for us to go back to public school, or I'm looking at these other private school programs, or we're looking to apply to the high school and going through the admissions process for that. As Katie mentioned, we also have our public school liaison team. So it's 3 staff members right now, headed by Carl Polkinen, who look at all publicly funded students programs, and they'll be the person in your IEP meetings who's guiding that. They also work with the academic advisor and the full team of all those publicly funded students to ensure that they're on track, the teachers are meeting the goals, the IEPs are up to date, and they also work with the public school on the other end as that bridge between Landmark and the public school setting. In the future, they are looking to also start covering privately funded students as well, and doing more counseling with regards to that in terms of placements that are upcoming. And that's something that they're working on potentially over the course of this year to prepare for a future school year. But that is something that they have in mind as well, trying to get more, I don't want to say counseling per se, but more guidance to all families at Landmark when you're ready to make that transition or when you're deciding to go to our high school. And also our missions team is a phenomenal resource as well. You reach out to them, they're always open to discuss moving to our high school, which we oftentimes have students graduate to every year, or looking at other placements as well.
And just add to that really quickly. that it's a really individualized decision. So it's not, we're not in, while we are in the market to not keep your children, it's not really our job to say, oh, your kid is ready to go. It's an individual process where you would have to say, I want my child to go to X, Y, or Z, and we have to see what are the supports in place at that particular placement. Would they meet the current needs of your student? So it's more of a process than a definitive answer of when transition is ready, because we've had lots of kids leave for lots of different reasons. And that's going to be up to you as a family decision and deciding what the placement looks like on the other end.
Great, thank you. So a question that's come up is about wooden math, and if that is a single approach that we're using. So for people who are unfamiliar with wooden math, if we could give maybe a little bit of an overview and just in terms of how we're approaching math instruction. And then I think maybe we'll do one more question and let everybody go.
So Chris Wooden is our math department head at Landmark's Elementary Middle School, and he's developed this program, Wooden Math, that is really kinesthetic based. So it uses a lot of out-of-seat activities. For example, students, when they're learning graphing, I know Emily talked about this earlier, that you'll physically graph yourself rather than just learning it in a very like two-dimensional way. He takes students outside and builds these big rote graphs. And like I said, it's all kinesthetic based, which we've found since the beginning of the school that really works best for our students. So it is a program that's not like other math programs in that it really tailors to how our students learn best and how their minds operate, and really helps them decode math in a new way. Like Chris Wooden likes to say that math is its own language, and he views it like that and explains to students about how basic addition facts or even fractions are all done with pictures. So it's a lot of icon graphing. So it really does look different than the math program that you may be familiar with at other programs. But we've had so much success with it year after year with all of our students. If any student isn't necessarily working with that Wooden Math program, he's very adaptable. We have a great math department who will tweak things and adapt them and reformat, but he's constantly creating new curriculum. It's one of the things that a great strength of his is to have like an individual student show a new way, or if something's not working, he loves to diagnose that and attack that. And then suddenly a new program is made that he's using with multiple classes. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, or if that suffices with the answer.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay.
I said one, but we're going to do two, hopefully really quick questions, and then we'll let everybody go. So one I think is super important, and I'm sorry I missed it earlier, but the concern was around students experiencing social isolation. So thinking about our smaller class sizes and a hybrid model where students aren't going to be around their peers necessarily on a daily basis. How is Landmark preparing to support students in their social needs?
I'd throw this to the deans, if either of the deans want to speak to this.
I think great question, Katie, and whoever asked it. So as far as the small classes, it's one big thing that works well for Landmark. And we definitely work hard to incorporate community activities, whether we're live on campus. We have a recess period, midday and lunch recess. And as Tara mentioned, we do have after school programs, an athletic program. And as far as the hybrid model, what we learned remotely that we were on for the last 3 months or so is we tried to incorporate that as well, where we had, for younger elementary students, a lunch Legos period if they wanted to join for lunch and build or talk about Legos. We had some lunch groups for older kids to get together. We realized that also we don't want kids on screen all day long, so they have time to get out and about and do things. But we definitely want to keep community. We're talking as an administration group getting ready for school year, depending on our model is to have orientation and make people feel part of a community, whether it's live or remote or combination. So it's always a work in progress, but we definitely don't want anyone to feel isolated. And we have the good thing about Landmark, and maybe the kids who were here, they probably maybe disagree, maybe they would agree, is there's a lot of faculty, so that means there's a lot of eyes and ears. So in my role in Terrace, kids are very surprised how quickly we know things. And it's because we have 85, 90 staff members. And so we can find out very quickly what's great happening or what needs to be worked on, so we can keep our hands on the game there.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Kirk. And the other thing is that Landmark has a very strong counseling department, some incredibly creative, thoughtful people. And while we don't provide therapy, the counselors work with individual students on social emotional development. They work with groups of students on social emotional development, pragmatics, social communication skills. They integrate with the teachers and the academic advisors into the curriculum. So they're very much a part of the program. So any student who has all those eyes on that person, as Kirk alluded to, who may be seeming to be isolated or pulling back, a counselor can work with that student and help sort of redirect, but they're always available. And even in the remote models, they've been very, very effective in working with groups and reaching out to kids because of the increased anxiety and increased social emotional issues of kids not being in school. So that team is really inspiring. They do a great job.
Great. So Emily Denoncourt answered the last question about OT in the chat. So I think maybe we got to everyone, all of the questions, but we are so accessible all summer. So please, if more questions come to mind, don't hesitate to reach out to us at admissions, and we can connect you to anyone within our faculty to make sure you get your questions addressed. Just to reiterate, we are certainly accepting applications. Please email versus mail so we can more quickly process. And I'll turn it over to Emily to wrap things up.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you everyone for coming today. It was wonderful to see you all and to share this information with you. And thank you to our administrators for being here. I do want to reiterate what Katie just said, that we are still accepting applications. So if you have just begun the process or have not yet applied, you can still submit materials. We have a rolling admission process, so there's no deadline for submitting materials. As we get closer and closer to the start of the school year, we are carefully monitoring space availability. And the process for planning for this year is complex. So as we think carefully about our class groupings and the model that we're working with, we're going to work with you individually as you go through the admission process to see if we have a space to offer. And if we don't, that rolling process continues through. We can always roll applications over for future consideration, continuing to update the materials that we have and just moving that process on and working with you. So the main point is to stay in touch with us, to submit materials, and we will work with you, and we're excited to review the materials and work with you on that. So thank you again, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Take care.